We're going to take a look at the caching mechanism now for rigid body dynamics. And basically, one of the nice things about the caching mechanism is the way it's tightly integrated with the animation mixer. So essentially, you can create rigid body simulations and have them automatically plotted to action clips and on the mixer to preview. So what this basically allows you to do is to do various runs of your simulation, plot them all to the mixer, and then preview them through the mixer. And in this way, an art director can come in and quickly look at all the different simulation runs and decide what works best. And on top of that, since you're on the mixer, you basically have access to all the animation tools there, so it's easy to blend between two different types of simulations to get a very specific art-directed look. So let's just take a quick look at how the caching mechanism works. So we're going to return back to our bridge scene with our little robot guys on them. And what we're going to do is go over to the current environment. And under the current environment in the simulation time control, this is where you can find all the caching options. So the first thing I want to mention is the whole play mode parameter. Now this isn't specifically related to caching, but it's an important point to kind of get across. Basically, by default, we're on this mode, and what this is an incremental update of the simulation. So it only updates from the current frame you're on to the new frame you're going to, so not from the beginning of the actual simulation. And this is an efficient way to work, since you just advance a few frames, and the simulation will only get computed for those new frames. The problem is if you're making changes, say, to initial state or things that affect the simulation from the beginning, we don't recompute that. So in that case, you're a lot better off going with standard mode. And in this case, we're recomputing the simulation from the beginning of the time control each time. So you're always sure your cache is correct, your simulation result is correct, but it does take quite a bit longer in terms of workflow. So my suggestion really is to work in live mode, and this is good for about 90% of the scenarios, and you'll get the fast update. And in general, that's what most users work in. So onto the caching stuff. It's a relatively simple procedure. You just enable caching, and then you want to go to the end of the timeline. And what this does is generates a clean cache for the entire timeline. So once that's done, what we want to do is just scrub the timeline to make sure the cache is giving us the correct results. So everything looks good there. And then what we want to do is go save cache to mixer, and we'll be prompted for an action clip name. So I'll just call that pin and wedge or something descriptive. And make sure you use a name that actually describes what that specific simulation is giving you. And that really helps later on when you have 20 or 30 simulations. You can easily pick out the results. So we can also add the clip to mixer. So what that does is it mutes the simulation time control and instantiates that clip onto the mixer. So we're no longer simulating, and we're reading the plotted results on the mixer. So I can just pin that PPG, and if we open up the mixer, you can see we have our clip there giving us the results plotted. And if we quickly look at the sources, you can see actually everything that we're actually driving through the mixer. And basically it's the position and rotation as well as the velocities of our different objects. And you can notice that the actual transforms are stored in global space, not local space. So that's an important point to keep in mind. So say now we want to plot a new simulation with some parameters in the rigid body system tweaked. What we can do is just mute this track, re-enable our simulation time control. So we're back into our simulation world here. Rewind back to the beginning. So we want to make some changes here. What we can do is just go to our scene root. Let's say in this case we want to try the simulation with the springs weakened to about 50%. So what that means is we're just going to take our spring KP constant, set that to 500. And like before, we just go to the end of the timeline to generate a clean cache. Then we can just save the cache to Mixer. We'll rename this something like Springy and add the clip to Mixer. So again, it mutes the time control and we have the clip there, so we can preview that result here. So notice we're getting a completely different result. And basically we can just mute different tracks obviously and preview the first one again. And so you can see the workflow. You can continually just reactivate the time control, make your changes, and replot it. And then once you're on the mixer course, we could blend between the two even by unmuting both and control the blending between the two to get different results. Obviously you have to be careful because in some cases a blend between two simulations will give you inaccuracies, like here they're falling through the floor. So it really works in specific situations where you just want to edit certain effects. So that really quickly is just a look at how the caching mechanism works with Rigid Body.